Morning. It's always good to come out and worship with us here at the Lenoir City Church of Christ. If you're visiting, thank you for being here. You are our honored guest. If you're watching online, we love that you're watching. And, just found out that Noah did break his arm. And so we'll definitely be thinking of Noah this morning as he went to the urgent care to figure that out. And obviously, with all the storms that have happened over the weekend, there are many people who are struggling with the topic that we're going to be talking about and will be. People just lost loved ones, lost homes, lost things they cared about, possessions, places. And so I've been, ever since this was a suggestion given to me, I kind of wanted to put it off, and then had some things happen this week, did some study this week that really kind of solidified some things for me. And so today we're going to be talking about healing from hurt. And I've concluded that everybody's hurting in one way or another. And it's not always that you're actively thinking about it or actively in pain or actively, where it's consuming your mind, but there are going to come times where the things that have happened to us in our past where they're just going to kind of pop out. All right? And at different times we handle that hurt better than other times. We handle the stress of it better than other times. And I was thinking about my uncle this morning, who just obviously lost his wife. And, I think about all the support I gave him for the first 3 weeks, the reminders, I wanted to check in on him, call him, and then I thought about the last month, how many times I've reached out to him. I'm like, he's still struggling with it. He's still having to deal with it, right? And, but that's going to be his life, is struggling, he's never, they say to get over it. You don't get over things. You learn to live with the pain. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about this morning. I don't want to give a big lengthy introduction. I just want to kind of get into it because we're going to have a lot to cover this morning. But I want to start by saying different hurts hurt differently. And even the same hurt, two people can experience something almost the same thing, right? Loss of somebody or loss of job or some kind of thing. And it's going to impact one person differently than another. And people deal with hurt differently. Sometimes it's based upon how you were raised. You watched your mom and dad and how they dealt with pain, right? If you're kind of sometimes born in the older generation, you dealt with pain by not talking about it, right? It's not there. It's there, but you're not allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to, mention it. And, sometimes this newer generation, it's all they want to talk about is their hurt and their pain. And I think there's a good balance where we have a community of believers who can come together, share, but also not just receive encouragement, but also realize that you don't have to live in that hurt for the rest of your life. You don't have to live in pain for the rest of your life. I read a thing the other day, and it's kind of becoming a more popularized view of depression and anxiety. And once again, I'm no expert, and I'm not going to offer my opinion on the realm, but they're starting to find more and more in these studies of depression and anxiety. The more you talk about your hurt, the worse it gets for you. But if you don't talk about it at all, it's going to one day come back and hurt you. Right? So there's got to be some kind of solution to get through some of these things, because I'm going to be honest, some of your hurt will never go away. Some of your pain will never go away. The thing that hurt you may never get resolved. I think about some different hurts that go on, and I do want to read Psalm 55. I'm not going to read every verse that I have up here. Some I'm going to reference because you know the stories well, but I want to read Psalm 55, and most likely this is a verse that David is writing about his counselor, Ahithophel. Now, Ahithophel was one of David's chief counselors that what we know is he betrayed him when his son tried to take the throne from him. Absalom turned on David and went and supported his son, and it's how David lost the throne, one of the ways, and then Ahithophel's advice wasn't taken later. But this most likely is David processing that hurt. Because him and Ahithophel, it says they were close, and he was more than a counselor. He was one of his close advisors. And as a king, you'd only bring close advisors in of those who you trust, those who aren't going to try to kill you, take the throne from you, right? And so look what he says. Verse 12 of Psalm 55. For it is not an enemy who taunts me. Then I could bear it. It is not an adversary who deals insolently with me. Then I could hide from him. But it is you, a man, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend. We used to take sweet counsel together. Within God's house, we walked in the throng. And so he's talking about a friend and a companion who has hurt him, right? In a way that feels like betrayal. And I'll be honest with you, hurt from a loved one, hurt from a friend, hurts worse than a Facebook warrior online, right? Right? Or a stranger. Someone, a passerby, someone who doesn't know you. You could easily dismiss it because this person doesn't know me. And so some people are struggling with hurt from a loved one. Now, I want to put yourself in that situation with David and Ahithophel. Do we remember who Ahithophel is? The grandfather of Bathsheba. Can you see why maybe Ahithophel betrayed David? You see, Ahithophel was hurt. He was hurt because of the sin that David did against his granddaughter. And so, for me, as a father, not yet a grandfather, but I can only imagine the feelings are, intensified as you become a grandfather. But if you do what David did to my daughter, I have the right to dethrone you. I have the right to betray you. You've betrayed me. Well, is that the proper way to deal with hurt? Betrayal on top of betrayal? You did it to me, so therefore I did it to you. Is God going to allow Ahithophel to just kind of slide because of all the things that David did to his family? Is that excuse Ahithophel? It doesn't. But what do we do when we hurt from those who we trusted, who are loved, and they either hurt us? Sometimes it's easier to deal with when someone hurts me. All right, you attack me, I can deal with that. You attack my family, it's going to be a little harder for me. And so some of us are dealing with that still, constantly. I know families who, they've stopped having family reunions because there's nothing to reunion about. It's fights and arguments, and I'm dealing with a situation not too long ago of a person who died, and I kind of think I brought this up, and they're still fighting about who gets what. This is a person who's died, and you're arguing over the dresser, right? You're arguing over this armoire she left. Well, she said it was mine. No, and they're not speaking to each other now because of that. So sometimes we deal with those types of things. Sometimes it's loss of family or physical blessings. You think about Job. You think Job had the right to hurt? You think he had the right to feel pain? Lost his family, wealth, possessions? Those are things we hold dear. Those are securities, right? Even, a lot of people talk about, well, your house, people live in poverty all the time. That's true. But when you're used to your walls being what keeps you protected from, like the storms we just had this weekend, right? Protecting you from those on the outside, allowing your kids to sleep sound and safe at night. When those things are gone, that's a legitimate hurt that people have to deal with. Sometimes it's guilt and shame. I want to read Psalm 38 real quick. Psalm 38, look at verse 4 through 8. It says, "For my iniquities have gone over my head. Like a heavy burden, they are too heavy for me. My wounds stink and fester because of my own foolishness. I am utterly bowed down and prostrate. All the day I go about mourning, for my sides are filled with burning, and there is no soundness in my flesh. I am feeble and crushed. I groan because of the tumult of my heart." And so this person has sinned in a way that has brought shame, right, and guilt into their life. And he's saying, I can't bear it anymore. I can't bear it. And unfortunately, oftentimes, when somebody does one of those big sins, right, I can start going through and naming them. What does that person get remembered for the rest of their life oftentimes? Sally, I'm trying to say a name that no one's in. There's no Sallys, right? Oh, Sally, she's the one who did X, right? Jonathan, right? No, Jonathan. He's the one who, right? You're remembered not always by the good things you've done. You're remembered by those negative things. And if the whole world is remembering you by those negative things, what do you think a person doing in their own internal dialogue? Sometimes they're tearing themselves up. So we got to remember that not all hurts are the same. Sometimes it's just physical pain. You think about the man who was born lame in Matthew chapter 9, or the man who was born blind. You think he's going to have a different set of circumstances than the rest of us are going to have, different pains and hurts, right? Especially during that time and era, right? If you were born blind, what did people assume? You or your parents sinned. You're born lame. It's kind of your fault, right? Something's happened in your family. This is some kind of punishment of God, and so people would avoid. Every now and then they may throw some breadcrumbs, right? Just enough for you to get by. But that is a lonely hurt that I don't think a lot of us can always understand. I think about some of us in here who have been dealing with knee pain or back pain or hip pain or shoulder pain, surgeries and recoveries, and you can't sleep at night, and you struggle with sleeping at night, and you don't get enough sleep at night, and you do that for a couple weeks in a row. You do that for a couple months in a row. Does that impact the way you interact with the world around you when you are in physical pain? So some of us are dealing with just physical pain, on top of maybe emotional, spiritual pain. I think about Elijah. You think Elijah was in pain? You think Elijah suffered hurt? You think not Elijah, right? If you're reading Elijah's story, the man who prayed and the rain stopped for 3 years, right? The man who defeated the 400 plus prophets of Baal. In the moment he found out that there was an enemy trying to kill him, what did he do? Fear and anxiety got the better of him. He asked God to end his own life because he didn't want to continue to live the way he was living. And he needed to be reminded that he's one, not the only one. And I think God gave him a mercy. Right? You think about Elijah, his work kind of ended right there. His work was then to pass the torch to Elisha. God knew, you've suffered enough. And God knows, and that's what we're going to be talking about this morning, God knows our weaknesses. God knows our limits, right? And he's going to allow us to be tested. He's going to allow us to be stretched and to be pulled. Why? Because that's where growth happened, isn't it? That's where growth... I want you to think about this for a moment. If you think about all the major organizations that go on in the world, all of these charities, what normally starts a charity? Someone suffered something. They know how bad that hurt their family. They did not have the support. They did not have the means. They did not have the networking. And they don't want someone else to go through it. So what do they normally do? They create a charity. They create an organization. One of my good buddies who I played hockey with, at a party, went out to his car, did something he shouldn't have done for the first time in his life. I mean, it was, and they were trying to force him to do it. He went and smoked something he shouldn't have. It was laced with something it shouldn't have been, and his car died. From our recollection, never had done it in his life before. He had been convinced of that party to do it. Died instantly. You know what his mother's been doing ever since the last 10 years of his death? Advocating for those who are struggling, creating recovery programs, creating support networks. Why? There was a hurt, and she's learned to not let the hurt destroy her, to debilitate her, but she's taking that hurt and that pain, and she's using it for good. So, with that, and that's kind of what our lesson is going to be on this morning, with that, she is a person that I know personally who is without Christ. Doesn't believe. Last I understood. And yet she's able to recover. Not only did she have that happen to her, her husband committed suicide when I was about 8 years old. You talk about a lady who's gone through stuff. How can someone who's suffered what I would consider if you have experienced one of those in your lifetime, that's enough. But two, and I'm sure there's more that I don't even know about or haven't heard about, things that have happened in their life. How do people get by? Because there are some people who are still dealing with hurt after 20 years, and it's debilitated them for 20 years, and it may for the rest of their life, because it just hurts so much. But first, I want to acknowledge something. When you read the Psalms aren't always pretty. And I've told you before about my experience with someone who was going through some stuff, and I read the wrong psalm to them. And it was a psalm that basically cursed God, blamed God, right? It was the next chapter I wanted to read. So go read Psalm 44. It's a complete complaint psalm. And I asked myself, and I didn't want to read that this morning, I want to read Psalm 13. Why would God allow that to be in His inspired word? Why would God allow someone to pen any accusation against God? First, do you think God's mature enough and big enough to handle our complaints? Do you think He's big enough and mature enough and holy enough to recognize when pain clouds our judgment and causes us to say and to do and accuse things that we normally wouldn't? Does it not happen in your own marriage? Doesn't it happen in your family? Doesn't it happen between friends? When someone's in pain and they're hurting, do they normally act rationally? And so when God allows this, and it's all over the Psalms, by the way, especially in Psalm 13, look at this. He says, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me?" You think God has forgotten him? Right? "How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Light up my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death." This is a person who's going to God. "God, I've prayed, I've prayed, I've prayed, I've prayed. I've sought your counsel, I'm seeking, and I have heard no answer." You ever felt like that before? You ever felt like God isn't listening? You ever felt like God doesn't care? You ever feel like God is with someone else more so than He is with you because maybe their life experiences from your outside perspective, right? We always have an outsider's perspective. Is just, wow, their life is so good. I don't think anybody really thinks that about themselves, that they've never had any pain or suffering or hurt that they've had to deal with, right? But when we're in pain and we're hurting, we lash out. And N.T. Wright has this thing, and I don't know what you know or care what you think about N.T. Wright, but he has a really good saying where he says, "When we lament, we hold our grief in God's presence and allow it to become a prayer." Think about that for a moment. When we hold out our grief before God, it becomes a prayer. What does Romans 8 tell us? That when we don't have the words and we grumble and we moan, you think God can take our complaints and go, "I understand what you're asking." Kind of like when someone's lashing out at you and you realize this is not normal and this person's angry, they're having a bad day, and instead of you taking it personal, what do? What's going on? I had a buddy call me last night. I was at the baseball field with Ben. He doesn't normally call me. And so I was like, this is kind of strange. What's going on? We text a lot. He calls, he says, "Hey man, I'm just thinking of you." And he's doing this, asking, he's like, "I'm going to bed." I said 8:30. He doesn't go to bed at 8:30. And apparently it's a TikTok that he was trying to do. And his wife recorded him calling all his friends and see how they respond. And I just kept asking him, and I've got it, the video. I was like, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" Like, this is not normal. And we have to kind of normalize that, don't we? Like when someone's oddly behaving, rather than hold kind of that over their head. How's it going? What's going on? Something must be off. Something must be different because you wouldn't normally be acting or doing these things. Now, we're really good at doing that for others. But how good are we at doing that for ourselves? Because sometimes when we lash out, when we are in anger, or when we're angry, when we're sad, when we can't, we're just not handling life well, do we give ourselves a break? Do we give ourselves a break? God is saying, cry out to me. Blame me all you want. Get your frustrations out. Now, I do want to read the end of that psalm because I think it's important. It says, lest my enemies say I have prevailed over him, and lest my foes rejoice because I am shaken, but I have trusted, what? In your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. The reason why we go to God and just it all over, because we know he cares for us. I mean, who do you share those things with? Who do you, when you are having those feelings, right, and when you're dealing with that stuff in life, and the person you call is the person, why do you call him? Was he the one who did it to you? Probably not. Was she the one who did it to you? Probably not. But they've got to listen, right? And you called them because you know this person cares for me. And they're going to hear. What I feel bad for is the people who don't have that person. That person they can call and say, I'm not doing well. Because you want to know oftentimes when you actually admit you're not doing well? What do people tend to do? Right? Back away, all of a sudden you don't hear from them anymore. All of a sudden you get ghosted, and so you get really good at just, you know what, I'm good. How you doing? I'm good. How you doing? I'm good. Are you? Are you good? God's saying, I know you're not good. Tell me. All right, God knows your heart. Say it anyway. Say it in prayer. Right? When you're praying with your spouse or you're praying with your kids, let them sometimes hear the worries and the anxieties of your heart, but let them also hear that you have worries and anxieties, but who are you going to with them? You're going to God, the one who can help, the one who can comfort, the one who can work things in your life that would not be worked without him. So that's who we go to. Now here's the tricky part. Here's the tricky part. Being willing to receive God's mercy and goodness. See, this is, I have more counseling sessions or phone calls in this area than almost anything else. How can God love me again? How can God forgive me? How can, right, maybe it's my loved one. How can he or she forgive me? And I'm going to tell you, if the world can forgive you, and you can get your spouse to work with you, maybe you've done something, or your kids, you've done something, maybe it's a friend, you've done something. If we can work it out, God, who is much more superior, much more gooder, right, much more holy, designed us, you think that he can go, you know what? We got this. We can work through this. When I forgive you, I want you to know that you are forgiven. I want you to know that you are forgiven. And that leads us to our reading this morning of Psalm 103. Look at David. You think David went through some stuff? David lived a life, man. He lived a life I wouldn't want. I wouldn't want to have what he went through, right? But he wrote some beautiful songs because of it. And most people who write really good songs, really good poetry, it's because they know what life is like. Right? Those songs that just hit, how does that hit so hard? That person's went through something. Or he's just picking up on every other country music, artist, or he's every other, person before him, whatever. He's maybe learned without having to go through it, but it is what it is. But look at this. Bless the Lord, O my soul, all that is within me. Bless his holy name. You see that? And part of us have to really understand that our soul is only going to receive healing from our hurt when we learn to bless God with all of it. It's very easy to praise God when everything is going good. It's easy to give thanksgiving when things are going good. We prayed. I just want to give you guys a little story. Ashley posted in the Lightpost app about a girl who went unconscious after she gave birth. Conscious for a day and a half, and then they went in and did another procedure on her, put her under, unconscious again. And they didn't know if she was going to come out of it, because the first time. And they did it so soon afterwards, which was a little bit irritating for us. We were worried. I put that post out. I had tons of people private message me saying we're praying. Within 20 minutes, she woke up. Was that God? Perhaps. But is God someone who can do that? Do you believe God answers prayers? Absolutely. And so we went to God, and there was restoration. He says, bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all His benefits. Right? When we're hurting, what do we often do? We forget about the good. We forget about the good, don't we? We stop counting our blessings. And once you begin internally focusing on all the negative things that have happened to you and all the bad and all, it will eat you alive. Where does bitterness come from? And why do older people tend to struggle with that more? It's not a symptom of being old, right? It's you've lived more life. And so what have you seen more of? You've seen more pain and more hurt. And you may have been able to go through 30 years of it okay and trusting in God and trusting in God. But sometimes there's one too many, isn't there? And it just breaks you. And I've watched people go from some of the most happy, joyful people that I know to ones who see no joy at all in any day that they've ever lived. What is that? Pain and hurt. Pain and hurt has eat them alive. And they need to not forget all the benefits of the Lord. It says, He forgives all your iniquity, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfies you with goods so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. The Lord works righteousness and justice for all who are oppressed. He made known His ways to Moses, His acts to the people of Israel. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. You think this is a verse that if you're dealing with hurt and pain, that you should go to and just meditate on and reread to yourself over and over and over again? Monday, I was at my brother's house in Nashville. And his wife is 4 weeks from pregnant. And she's uncomfortable. Never been there. I've eaten a big meal before and been uncomfortable, but I've never had a baby in my belly. And she has these all over her house, these affirmations of just reminding her to breathe. Remember God is good. Remember God has blessed her with this. This is a natural process. Like all these different affirmations. And, I found myself reading them and feeling good about myself. Or not feeling good about myself, but feeling better. Right? You read something and she's got verses posted up, and it's not about having the verses. It's about thinking about those things, the goodness of God in the times of pain and hurt. Right? And you can get through pain and hurt with enough goodness, can't you? Now, the problem comes when those pain and those things never end. And that's where I kind of want to push us into the next point here. Gerald May is a medical doctor, but also a spiritual advisor. He wrote a book called Addiction and Grace. Extremely good book if you ever want to read a really good book about someone who's processing addiction but finding grace and mercy in God. It says, God does not waste our suffering. Pain, when offered to God, becomes the soil of transformation. Think about the story of Joseph. Right? Think about the story of Joseph. At the end of the story, what did his brothers fear after their parents died? What Joseph was going to do. Now they're going to kill me. Now Joseph's going to kill me. Because dad was the only reason, right? Dads kind of do that, right? Parents do that. And then when parents die, brothers, sisters, they're just as human as we are. It's just funny how I kind of link this. The stuff that I'm dealing with a family that I'm struggling, trying to counsel, not doing any good for, it feels like. There's the same people as Joseph and his brothers back then. Nothing new under the sun. Families still have the same family dynamic. It's weird and awkward because you've got to love these people because you're born into the family, right? But sometimes there's not as deep connection as the ones you form and you forge in life with friends, and especially those in the church. Right? I think those in the church, our bonds should be thicker than blood. Why? Because Christ's blood's better than yours. All right? And He unites us more so than you're united with those who you were, born out of the same womb of. All right? We're born again from above. But Joseph had to realize it wasn't you. God worked this pain. Right? He had to be sold into slavery. Not fun. Right? away from his family in a dark pit, not fun. Sold into Potiphar's house, not fun. Had to be accused of doing something he didn't do, not fun. Spent over 3 years in jail because of something he didn't do, not fun. But what did he have to focus on? What was God doing with all this pain? What was he accomplishing through Joseph? Now, what if Joseph, instead of seeing that God was working through him, said, I'm going to stay in jail. The world out there, I don't want to be a part of. Every time I go out there, I get hurt. And so what do a lot of people do when they get hurt out in the world? I'm going to stop living. That's when you begin to die. When you stop living is when you begin to die. Your relationships will start dying, right? Your joy will start dying. Why? Because you're too trying to escape all the bad things of the world. Well, Jesus prayed, I don't want you to take them out of the world. I want you to keep them from the evil one. You need to be the light in someone else's life. And you can't do that in your own four walls, being there all the time. You got to get out, right? You got to share. Coming to church, I think that's a big thing, right? Can you worship from home? Yeah. Right? Can you worship online? I think it's a substitute, not the best one. All right? Sick, you're home, okay. But you cannot get at home what you get here. And you can't get here what other people get here. If the moment Jesse stops breathing, right, to preach, you shoot out those doors. I talked to someone last week, won't name names, but I love you. I'm not going to. And I asked if I could share this. The person was struggling with some church stuff. We all do, don't we? I said, you know what? Maybe if you came a little early, talk to some people, and maybe if you didn't leave immediately, people would be able to, talk to you. Right? It kind of goes both ways. If you're shooting out the door, and then why is the church not? You're not a part. We're not just here for the worship portion. We are here in fellowship, right? And if you're not fellowshipping, then you're missing a big part of why we're here, isn't it? Right? So I just want to offer that advice real quick. But I want to keep reading. Look at verse 10. I love this. And this is something that I really had to process in my life. I don't know who I was talking to the other week, and I started just sharing a couple stories like, man, you did live some life. I was like, well, not as bad as others, but I'm not proud of everything that I did. But look at verse 10. He does not deal with us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. Amen. We do not get what we deserve if you are in Christ. How many times do you get treated in ways that you deserve? And you know what? You can go, you know what? I deserve that. But how good is it to feel when someone goes, you know what? I'm going to let this one slide. How good does that feel to receive forgiveness and not be treated for the way you may have, in hurt and pain, treated someone else? Doesn't that feel good? Imagine a God who wants your salvation, desires your salvation, sent his own son for your salvation. You think he's going to treat you like a sinner? You think he's going to treat you by all the bad things you've done? You think he's going to remember you? Oh, Jesse, yeah, he's the one who did. Jesse, he's the one who said. Jesse, my beloved child. Jesse, a precious stone in the kingdom. That's hard for me to process. That's hard. I grew up in a very critical environment where even when I was the best at something, it wasn't always good enough. And so I struggle with that, processing that. But the reason God can do that is for as high as the heavens are above and the earth, So great is the steadfast love toward those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far does he remove our transgressions from us. As a father shows compassion to his children, as the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him, for he knows our frame, and he remembers that we are dust. Any parents in here? Any of you have a perfect child? If you did, exit stage left. I don't want to talk to you. Right? Anyone have a perfect child? Anyone who had a child who maybe talked back before? Child did something, the school calls up like, oh, I got to talk to you about Jesse. You're like, oh boy, what did he do this time? They're not perfect. But do we ever lose our love for them? We lose our care for them, our desire to want them, their good, and to them have a blessed life. You think God's any different? You think God's ways are not higher than our ways? As a father shows compassion to his child. I love the Matthew 1:5, Rahab the harlot. Old Testament, it's called Rahab the harlot. New Testament, it's called the grandmother of Jesus. Harlot to the story of Jesus. That's a pretty cool story, isn't it? Rahab the harlot, lineage of Christ, and named, not in shame, proudly named as being a part of, and guess who she raised? Boaz. And Boaz was the one man in the group of all of the Jewish children of God. Remember, Rahab was not, but she raised Boaz, and all of a sudden Boaz sees another foreigner. His mother's a foreigner. Why do you think he tended toward the foreigner? And realize all the looks Ruth received. You think Ruth got some looks being a Canaanite? Think she looked different? Had a different accent, spoke differently, had different hair color, different eye color? And in that realm, you lived amongst your people. So you got a foreigner, it's noticeable. Boaz goes, I've got one of those in my family. And I want to make sure she's tended for and cared for. Who raised him to be that kind of man? Rahab, not the harlot. Rahab, the woman of God. Think about that. Named in the lineage of Christ. Raised Boaz himself. I think that's pretty awesome. That reminds me of Romans 8:28. For God is working all things together for those who love him for good. Maybe not your good in the way you want good, but for his good. And the best good. We just got to be able to see it. I want to offer this advice before I get into our steps, and we'll be done in about 5 minutes, I promise. Maybe 10. Learn to live with the memory, but without the pain. You're not going to forget it. You cannot forget the things that have happened. They still hurt. But the pain doesn't have to define you. And I love what he says in his book. He says, sometimes healing means living with grace instead of resolution. This may never be solved. This may never come to a resolution. But grace doesn't always need it to. I was talking to my brother Monday when I was in Nashville. We were talking about forgiveness. He goes, what happens when someone dies before you can kind of bring resolution? I said, well, you really don't need to worry about it after that. Right? And what you need to do is process, if this person was still here, would you be willing to repent or willing to forgive? And think about, and I said, go into your mind's eye and think about what it would look like if you did bring resolution. And remember that feeling. Remember that feeling as if. One of my favorite songs by NF is called Happy. Living as if you're happy. Because he was raised in a situation, an environment, there was no happiness to be found. Mama drug dealer, right, or not drug addict. Dad died, lived in a shady neighborhood, had to kind of live his own life, and he kind of, the music video is amazing, and he just had to remember, what would it look like if I were happy? And that got him through those days of pain. And he's processed that, and he's now helping others deal with that same pain that others are going through. But in 2 Corinthians 12, remember when Paul prayed for the thorn in the flesh to be removed from him? What did the Lord say? I'm not removing it. I'm not removing it. But my strength is made perfect where? In your weakness. You think the lady I talked about earlier wanted to have to go through that pain, right, to start a foundation to help those who are going through drug addiction? You think she wanted to have to be woken up to that reality? No. But do you think that she did the best with what she had afterwards to help others? You think she's ever going to forget her son? The pain of losing her son? Never. But in his memory, she's going to do the best that she can with what she has. Isaiah 61, I want us to read here real quick. It's actually, Luke quotes Isaiah 61 as the beginning of Jesus' ministry. This is why Jesus came, and this is kind of where we're going right now. Isaiah 61, 1 through 3. I want you to read this with me. It says, the Spirit of the Lord of God is upon me. This is the mission of Jesus, by the way. This is the mission of the Messiah. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, the opening of the prisoners to those who are bound. Flavel Yeakley would summarize this with find a hurt and heal it. Jesus knows we're hurting, and he brought what we needed to heal it. That's evangelism. Evangelism to find a hurt and heal it. And when you see someone who's hurt and in pain, are they going to act rationally all the time? Are they going to be the people that they need to be and can be? No, but you need to see through it and realize their untapped potential. Jesus saw the potential of his creation. While we were sinners, he died for the ungodly, but he also realized that dying for the ungodly and giving us hope would transform us and take us from sinners and people who lived in sin to people who could actually do some good in this world. To be lights into our communities, to be lights into the world, to take our pain and our sin and our suffering and to do something good with it. Look at, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn. And verse 3 is where I want to focus. To grant those who mourn in Zion. To give them a beautiful headdress instead of ashes. What does ashes symbolize? You would put on sackcloth and ashes when you were mourning and hurting and in pain. What would you put a headdress on for? Celebration. For a thankful event. The oil of gladness instead of mourning, the garment of praise instead of a faint spirit, that they may be called the oaks of righteousness and the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified. Ultimately, this life is not about us. It's about glorifying God. And when we can't work through our pain, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that this sermon, everyone's going to walk out and pain's going to be just, taken care of. It's not going to work that way. But our job as Christians is to glorify God. Can we do that mumbling and complaining? We can't. Can we do that spending the rest of our life hurt from all the pain? And because we're hurt, we're going to hurt others. And we're going to let other people know that we're hurting. Usually the saying goes, hurt people. People who bully tend to usually go look at their home or go look at some situation. There's probably bullying going on, and that's how they express themselves. And Jesus is saying, I can change that. We can take a bully and turn him into someone who helps and supports and encourages. I can take your pain and I can bring healing to not only you but also to the world around you. But you've got to make that decision. You've got to make that transition. Remember, Psalm 103:14, God remembers that you're dust. Are you always going to be good at that? No, that's why you have prayer. That's why you have lament. That's why God wants you to cry out, to share, to express yourself. And even in the process of healing, you're still going to struggle. It's not going to become easy. It's not like everything's just going to go away. That's why you got to have these steps that we're going to talk about. And I'm not going to read all these passages. First one, you got to lament honestly. A lot of times when people are suffering and in pain, they don't lament honestly because they're so worried about blame. They're so worried about blame and who's to blame and who's to blame and who's to blame. Release that. Release blame, right? Release trying to figure out whose fault it is. Go to God and say, God, I am hurting. I am hurting, and be honest about it. Be okay with it. But also you got to receive the compassion. You think about Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, at the end of Lamentations, which is a book of crying. It's called Lamentations for a reason. But go read Lamentations 3:22. It's actually where we get our song. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. How can he go from a lament to praise? Because not everything is one emotion. You're not just going to feel lament or praise. You can feel both. And if you can't understand that, go watch the movie. I just lost it. It's gone. There's a good movie out there that somebody just said it. Anger, joy, sadness. What? Inside Out. Go watch Inside Out. I'm serious. As an adult, go watch the kids' movie. You'll be amazed. All right. Next, Ephesians 4:31 says you got to remove the bitterness. You got to remove anger. You got to remove all those negative feelings. I know it's not easy, but if you keep hate, anger, bitterness, pride, all those things in your heart boiled up, you will never move on. You will never be able to do the next step, which is work towards forgiveness. Sometimes it's forgiving yourself, isn't it? Sometimes it's forgiving your own actions and the things that you've done, even if nobody else will forgive you. You becoming, you know what, I did hurt people at a time when I was hurting. And I've got to be okay with acknowledging that, letting people know, hey, I was hurting and I hurt somebody, or I did something I shouldn't have done. I'm going to seek forgiveness. And if they won't, you've still got to learn to do what? You got to forgive yourself. There's a lot of family dynamics out there, right? Families are just those weird little, I don't know what causes them, but there's never going to be resolution. And a person may never forgive you. A person may never let you live down what you did in the past, but you don't have to live that way. You don't have to remember yourself that way. You don't have to think about yourself that way. Learn to forgive. Learn to be tender-hearted. And I would say you can't love your neighbor as yourself if you don't love yourself. Next, seek Christ's community. Seek a community of believers who will be there for you and help you process the pain, right? Sometimes it may only be one or two people. Sometimes it may be a small group you have. Sometimes it may just be one, but find someone who has that faith mind, who's going to remind you of the goodness and the mercy of God. Sometimes we got to be reminded of that, right? You got to be reminded. And then finally, I want to end, and I think this is probably a sermon I'm working on after I've been studying this. You heal through worship. Healing through worship. I think about the songs we sang this morning. How can you sing of the steadfast love of the Lord? How can you worship that way and praise God that way if you don't feel it on Monday? If you feel shame and guilt and you feel pain all the time and you can't see the love of God, how can you worship? Worship helps you get through it. The Psalms are a book of what? Praise and worship. Who wrote them? People who were hurting in times of hurt and pain. Why did they write it? To help them process what they're going through and to remind them of the goodness and the mercy and the goodness of God. And finally, service. Right? Romans 12, 1 through 2 talks about how, removing and being transformed into the image of God, giving our bodies as a living sacrifice. This is your heavenly, some versions say worship, some say service, but they kind of go hand in hand. Right? When you're serving God, what are you doing? You're worshiping in a sense, not in our corporate sense that we talk about Sunday morning, but you're giving honor and praise and dominion to God when you serve through the love of God. And so, this morning, why did we spend time, Don got up, and to remind us of the cross? Remind us of the Old Testament and all the sacrifices they had to make. What is the point of processing this every week? You don't deserve what God has given. You don't deserve it. You've hurt people, you've sinned, and if you don't think so, you got to have someone else be a little more honest with you than you're being with yourself. But we process this every week so we can be reminded that I don't deserve to be at this table with the Lord. And yet He loves me anyway. And He invited me to come. We talk about what we do up here, celebration He used. I like the word communion. That's why I put up on the board, commune with us. It is a communion with God. It is sitting at His table. It is being reminded that we are in the fellowship, in the presence of God, even though we are sinners, that we have been saved from that. God's not going to hold it over us, and His ways are above our ways, and His love's above our love. Even when our hearts, we looked at last week, condemn us, God is greater than our hearts. Come to the one who created you, who knows your pain and suffering, because Jesus came and lived in this world, right, to feel that same pain, to feel that same temptation. And when you pray to Him, He is a merciful high Father, high priest, who can show compassion on us. So that's what Jesus did at the cross. But remember, the cross wasn't the end. The resurrection happened. 3 days later, Jesus was raised. What is He showing us? You will be raised too. 1 Corinthians 15, what does it say about the sting of death? He removed it. Oh, death, where is your sting? Right? And the last enemy to be defeated will be the second death. So this morning, if you're not a Christian, why not? You're going to go through everything that everyone else is going through. You're going to have pain. You're going to have suffering. It's the world we live in. It's a sinful world because in the beginning, Adam and Eve, they were born in this perfect condition, perfect environment, walking with God. And us as humans chose rebellion. We chose our own pain and our hurt. And a lot of times, a lot of your pain and suffering, you caused yourself. You hurt yourself more so than probably other people hurt you. It's easier to focus on how other people hurt us because we can find blame there. Find blame in ourselves is a lot harder to do. But God made a promise in the garden that I would send a seed of woman who would come and would pay that price for you. Would take away the pain. Take away the suffering. Not right now in this world the way it is, but He's coming again to renew all things. Back to the way it was in the garden. We can walk with God blamelessly, not fearing death, not fearing the lion, the bear, not fearing our enemies. We can live in the peace and the comfort of God's presence forever. That's what we invite you to. And if you're a Christian this morning, don't think because you became a Christian that Satan leaves you alone. He's going to amp up. He's going to amp up. And you know what he wants you to really remember in your life? I want to remember everything. I want you to remember everything that someone's done to you. I want you to make a list. I want you to keep it in your head. I want you to wake up with that list of everything, all the mean stuff, all the bad stuff, everything. Why does He do that? Why does the enemy work that way? Because he knows what makes us tick. He knows what can interfere with our worship and praise and service. Make a person become bitter. Right? Make a person become angry. And you'll forget about the steadfast love of the Lord that never ceases. This morning, if there's anything that you have this morning, we ask that you come forward as we stand together and sing.